This is Casey Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice, produced by Charitable Communications. We'll tell the stories of Kansas City nonprofits and the people behind them. Casey Cares is proudly sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation. I'm Ruth Baum-Diggus.
And I am Bobby Keys.
And nothing like flubbing it up when you have
the main man here
as our guest.
You had one job, Ruth.
I had one job, and I flubbed it up. We are referring to, of course, Larry Jacob, who's Vice President of Public Affairs at the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation.
Yes.
I got it right.
You got it right.
Yay!
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
This has been like a marathon. He's so busy to get you here. We're like honored. We'll have to take a bazillion pictures in case this doesn't happen again.
I'm sure it will.
For a long time. So welcome to Casey Cares, and we want to dig into what you are charged with at the Kauffman Foundation.
Sure. So it's one of those weird titles, right? What does public affairs mean? But really, it reflects back to Mr. Kauffman and thinking through something he said. I'm going to paraphrase. But basically, all the money in the world can't solve problems. But working together, there's no problem that we can't solve. So public affairs is charged with getting more people to understand the types of work that we're doing, to engage them in that work, and hopefully take some action and some positive actions to help others become successful in their lives. So that's really the focus of our job. That means communications, that means helping with events, that means convenings, that means pulling people and resources from around the country to help us here in Kansas City understand our context.
So you're kind of like a jack of all trades in a way.
Yeah,
right?
So we support all of the programmatic areas of the foundation. We dig deeply into Kansas City as well. We help tell the foundation's stories, and we help tell the stories of entrepreneurs, of students, of teachers, and others, and that's really our focus.
So for a lot of people who don't know, listening for the first time, and they don't know exactly, what the Kauffman Foundation does, you were just talking about entrepreneurs and education. Can you kind of give them just a brief overview? Like this is our goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we see our job as working with communities in education and entrepreneurship to help people increase the opportunities that allow them to take more risks, that allow them to learn, and ultimately define success in their own way, right? And give back. And that's the easiest way to say our mission based off of Mr. Kauffman's intent.
Programmatic areas. Let's dive in a little bit there. Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurship, I think, is a huge nugget. Somebody had mentioned to us at one point in time when we were talking about the radio show and what we're trying to do in the nonprofit community, well, you're entrepreneurs. And we both looked at each other and went, we are? I guess we are.
Yeah.
So if you can bring that down a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, entrepreneurship, especially in national media, it's very focused on those high growth tech firms and venture capital and things that aren't particularly relevant to most people's lives. Mm-hmm. Only 0.5% of all new businesses get venture capital.
Wow.
0.5%. But you feel like it's everywhere. And mm-hmm. So really our role at the foundation is to help somebody who has an idea, who wants to do something, start something, give them the tools and the resources and the connections so that they're able to do that. Break down barriers along the way to help them do that. And that means policy, it means research, but it also means supporting programs that are very localized that help entrepreneurs, things like KC SourceLink, that can help you navigate a complicated system here in Kansas City.
Now, does it all have to be, maybe I missed this, does it have to be nonprofit, or does it have to be something that's more community-oriented or cause marketing or cause-oriented?
No, actually, entrepreneurship we take in the broadest form. That can be for-profit, nonprofit, social mission, or not. If you're developing a workforce, if you're supporting others, that's really part of the entrepreneurship programming that we do.
And on the education side, I know we had Corey Scholes on the show earlier this year, and all that you're doing there. How do you choose what to do? There's so many things out there and so many people with needs.
Sure.
So how do you cut that down?
Well, it all goes back to Mr. Kauffman's intent. And, basically it comes down to this. He saw people are born, you get skills throughout life to take a maker job and then give back to your community, right? So along that continuum, where can we have an impact as a foundation? We do work nationally, we do work regionally, and we do work very localized here in Kansas City. And we think that all of those things feed each other and help support each other. So choosing is based off of what's the best situation for our community, what's the best way for us to intervene with funding that might stimulate some other thought. we give away a lot of money, but the money is not really what drives change. So in education, that's particularly true. There's, a lot to do in early education. There's a lot to do in the K-12, system. There's a lot to do in ensuring higher education access and success and different pathways that students may choose along the way. Supporting teachers. All of that is part of our education portfolio. It's comprehensive because you can't just piece apart different elements of it. It all really does work together.
You do help an awful lot of nonprofits, including us. Thank you. How does a nonprofit take that first step and look to see whether the Kauffman Foundation is an organization that can help them?
Yeah. That's great. Like the first place to go is our website, Kauffman.org. There is a section on there about how to work with us, and it will give you examples of what we fund, why we fund, the strategies that we're deploying in education, entrepreneurship, and in Kansas City, and pathways that may make sense for your nonprofit. There are things we don't fund. We don't fund capital campaigns, for example. We can't fund anything that's direct advocacy lobbying, so we don't do anything that crosses a line there outside of education for lawmakers and policymakers. So, there's kind of a do's and don'ts list of things we fund right on our website, and that's probably the best place to start.
And you have all kinds of programs, too.
We do.
That people can take advantage of. Can you name some of those that folks might kind of tune into and look for?
We play a little bit behind the scenes role on a lot of these things, but to answer your question about entrepreneurs, there's a group that meets every Wednesday called 1 Million Cups.
Yes.
1 Million Cups was actually launched in the
Kansas City.
Well, yeah, and even more in the cafeteria of the Kauffman Foundation,
Oh,
where
wow. That's awesome.
entrepreneurs and staff were just getting together to figure out how can we better support each other and develop something. Out of that came a process where, for those that aren't familiar with 1 Million Cups, they meet every Wednesday morning. There's a crowd. There are a couple of presenters that talk about their idea, what they're trying to do, and get feedback from judges. So it's kind of like a nice Shark Tank, one that really helps just answer questions and clarification. Then the audience weighs in.
Nice.
What we've found now, it started here in Kansas City. It's in 183 communities nationwide now. So
183.
Awesome.
Wow.
And
it started here.
And it started here in Kansas City.
In the cafeteria.
Yeah.
With coffee.
Yeah. Another thing that started here is Global Entrepreneurship Week. So that also started a week in November here. It's in 160 countries around the world now. And for a full week, everything from governmental entities down to grassroots organizations focus in on how do you help people start things so that they can either, create wealth for themselves and others, and what barriers are in the way. When we're looking at a Kansas City or we're looking at most of America, there are historic, racial, systematic barriers that are in the way of getting that credit card or getting that bank loan or getting any of those resources. Or on a more practical level, it's just connections.
Yeah.
What high school did you go to? Well, that opens up doors.
Yeah.
Right.
What college did you go to? Well, that opens up doors. So if you don't have those connections into places that can help you grow or start a business, it makes it really difficult. And those are the types of things that we're trying to unpack and knock down those barriers.
Yeah, that's pretty. I love that because it kind of speaks to a lot of what's happening today with the wealth disparity.
Right.
You have a bunch of people who are, like you said, bigger organizations on the grassroots, and we're all kind of sharing. Do you see that that's more of a sustainable model or more of a working model for a community as a whole? Like having it.
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah.
When you look at a region like Kansas City, for us to be competitive for the next 20, 30, 40 years, we can no longer afford to leave untapped assets on the table. And that's people, and that's our businesses.
Yeah.
So, I think there's a balance here. We do need to try to draw in talent from other places of the country.
Yeah.
We do need to pull in a company now and then that can create really high-paying jobs for folks.
Yeah.
But we have to invest in our own. That's what we have to grow. We have to grow our own folks, and we have to grow our own companies. When you drive around Kansas City, what gives us our culture here, right? You think about the companies that started here, whether that's Gates, right? Or whether that's H&R Block or Hallmark or, Mr. Kauffman's firm that's no longer with us but has that ongoing legacy. Things are homegrown.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't draw in, Boeing to change the complexion of our city.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen actually in many communities.
I love that, and I think that speaks to why Kansas City is just like, I don't know. I've been able to travel, and you always hear, and it's the same thing. Kansas City is the most genuine place in America. Like, it's one, like, people so nice, but it's like we invest in our community. And it's a reflection. It kind of permeates through everything, from our sports to our businesses to to the arts and to the philanthropy. And that's I don't know. I don't know why I brought that up, but I just thought it was cool. Kind of talking point.
Midwest nice.
Yeah, Midwest nice.
Yeah, I think now it's time to maybe break through Midwest nice and get to Midwest do.
Yeah.
Right. So, the challenge that I think we bump up against is not confronting some of the issues that have been systemic, that have been in place for a long time. And it's not unique to Kansas City. This is, everywhere under the sun. For the last year and a half, we've been hosting a community conversation that was spawned by Opportunity Zone legislation, and I'm happy to get into the details of that. But the really important thing there is having honest conversations about how did we get here? What did our highway systems do to segment off neighborhoods, right? What did redlining do to put people way behind on wealth accumulation? And how does that have a barrier today? So if people are in positions of power today, the folks I talk to have really great intentions, but they're dealing with legacy systems that are still barriers and blocks. And how do we push through that as a community and ultimately as a nation? We have to confront it, but let's start local and thinking that through.
Do you see that kind of, because me, being biracial, and growing up in both worlds, I do see it. I see it, and it's amazing that people don't.
Right.
They don't, and they deny it. Oh, redlining doesn't exist. There's no systemic. And I'm like, no, you have to just accept it and realize it. And that seems to be, what you're talking about is just kind of, and then moving through it.
Right.
And then as that, you kind of grow.
Yeah.
As a community, do you see more minority businesses kind of developing in Kansas City, or is that something that's...
It's still lagging. We'd like to see more. There's a particular focus on it from a lot of groups. I think the good news, though, is you have more groups focusing on the issue and looking very seriously at the barriers that are in place, not just the Kauffman Foundation. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce is pushing, quite a few initiatives. The Civic Council of Greater Kansas City pushing initiatives. And they're coming alongside groups that have been in the trenches for a really long time, whether that's the Urban League or Community Builders at KC and others that are trying to move things forward, whether that's AllCap working on the financial side of getting more minority and women business owners up and running. You have more people coming alongside and recognizing those questions. One interesting thing, the foundation brought in a group called the Racial Equity Institute that breaks down the data of your city and focuses on what historically has gone on here. So it puts the race conversation in a place of fact. It puts the race conversation in a place where you can say, okay, now I see some of these trends that I may have not been familiar with at all. We've had more than 500 leaders in our community go through that training.
That's awesome.
So it's a start.
Yeah.
Right? It's a start of a conversation. It's a way to get some basic level facts together so that you can now say, okay, well, what do we do about that, and where do we go from here? And that's what we're trying to do, is just stimulate more of that conversation for problem solving.
Yeah, the data's huge, because that you can't deny that.
Right.
There's a lot of people that can't differentiate between an opinion-based statement or a factual-based statement these days. So it's like you got to have the data. Like, this is what's happening here. You know,
absolutely.
This isn't opinion. This isn't opinion. This is actual facts.
And it's all the way around.
Yeah.
It's really going back to that community conversation that we've been sponsoring around opportunity zones, looking at a geography and hearing from residents and hearing from groups that are working in the area, and then hearing from the city. You have very different points of view. And we hear it all the time. Like, I'll go to the east side of Kansas City, and folks will say the Kauffman Foundation doesn't put any money over here. Well, the reality is we put millions and millions of dollars a year into the east side. It's our primary focus. The city is the same thing. When you look at where the city's investments are going, there's $1 billion worth of infrastructure investment happening on the east side, but residents aren't feeling that directly. So
there's a disconnect.
There's a disconnect. So how do we better adapt to that? How do we better, listen to what the residents are seeing, feeling, and experiencing on a day-to-day? And then how, from a more grass top point of view, how can you help change some of the systems that are at play that, will hopefully improve the day-to-day existence of anybody living in the neighborhoods? That's the conversation we've been having for about a year now.
Do you ever just wake up and go, oh my gosh, there's a lot on the plate? And how do you tackle it?
Yeah. Every day, every day. And I think it's something that is unique when you work at a foundation because you recognize you have these resources, right? And so it's unlike any other vehicle that you've been part of. Like our job is actually to give money rather than raise money, rather than, kind of scrape it together. And I've been on all sides of that equation as a business owner, as somebody that's worked in the nonprofit sector and also helped support government entities. This is a very different beast, right? So I think the folks that work at the Kauffman Foundation feel that pressure every single day to say, okay, we have this unique thing. How do we not blow it? Right? Because we don't know everything. We know we don't know everything, but at the same time, we're trying to listen and learn so that we can make new mistakes instead of the same mistakes.
And the brilliance of Ewing Kauffman you'd love to connect with him somehow and say, is this what you envisioned?
Yeah.
And just knowing a little bit about him and his personality, my guess would be no, but I knew to plant a seed that would keep growing and with good helmsmanship and leadership would go and expand. You recently had a post on the website that we just have a little McNugget of time, but they were kind of like 3 challenges for nonprofits and how maybe they could tackle them. And then we'll refer people to go to the website and read it.
Sure.
What were those three key points maybe that we can keep in the minds of our nonprofit listeners?
Yeah, I mean, one big piece is it relates to a topic we were just addressing is around funding inequity. Foundations overall fund who they know in a lot of ways, right? So we're trying to dig deeper into the community and understand the funding inequities, especially by groups that are led by people of color. So that's one big trend that we see. Another big piece that we see is investment in technology and talent. Foundations are moving more towards helping nonprofits better track their results and their outcomes, but you don't have the technology necessarily to do that. So really focusing on that. And then, race, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as we're looking at not only who we fund, but also who the beneficiaries are. Are you listening to the beneficiaries? Is there a feedback loop there? Is there an opportunity to learn more about what people need so that you can deliver better services? How do you do that in a very culturally competent way? Those are 3 of the bigger trends that we're seeing, and our KC Civic work addresses that through a lot of capacity building investments with nonprofits.
Larry, it's been great to have you. We got to have you back. We'll have to get on the calendar 6 months out because you're so busy running around doing all this great stuff.
I really appreciate the time today.
Go to Kauffman.org. It is a wealth of information and help and positivity.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.